Listen. You listen to DBS for unbiased coverage of breaking news, original programs, and so much music. You listen for the information that will change your lives and the humor to brighten your days. So here at DBS Radio, we deliver. We deliver timely news, information to live by, and the everyday interaction that we all so need. These are the things that make DBS Radio the better sounding radio in Dominica. Keep on listening.
Good evening. My name is Rashida Saran Davis. I am the media officer for the PISLM, that is the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management. Our objective is to advance natural resource management in Dominica, landscape level planning, information and coordination frameworks that are being established in 5 parishes in Dominica. The idea is to support the agriculture and forestry sectors in becoming more resilient and sustainable for a better future for Dominica. This evening, I'm here with 3 panelists. We're going to discuss how the work that we have been doing in these projects has already helped improve some resilience and sustainability for the people of this country. We can discuss this from 2 different perspectives this evening, agriculture and forestry. So I've invited some panelists to join me to have this discussion. With us tonight, I'll start with our visitor who has come to visit us from Guyana, Mr. Lakram Singh. He is our Chief Technical Officer for the PISLM, which is actually a regional organization. We are actually working projects in 9 countries, Dominica included. I also have with me the National Project Coordinator, Mr. UN James. He works locally in Dominica to operate the 2 projects that we have been running, which are strengthening resilience of agricultural lands and forests in Dominica in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. We call that one the Post-Maria Project for short. And the other one is Sustainable Land Management in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Those are the names of the 2 projects. Our third panelist is joining us from ICA. That is the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, Dominica Delegation. And he is the Technical Director of ICA Dominica, Mr. Kent Koppel. So I'd like to begin by asking all 3 of my panelists what they believe this year's most significant PISLM activity was and why. Like you, Mr. Koppel.
I was hoping that you allow Johan to start the bowling to give a greater perspective of the project. Notwithstanding, I'm happy to be the opening bats, and just to indicate that the project and its objectives towards natural resource management, and more so to promote the adoption of technical approaches that would reduce farmers' vulnerability. And when I say farmers, meaning their farmland, their vulnerability to climate events and the extreme natural weathers. I think this year we experienced some of the actions towards installation of best practice or technologies that would reduce some of the vulnerabilities, and these were done on the farmlands for a number of farmers, and I think that it would be a very significant achievement this year. And as we speak, I'll raise some of the other things that may have happened in the project that can be considered also important to the effort of the project.
Okay, very well. Mr. James, same question.
Oh, okay.
What do you think the year's most significant activity was?
Yeah, thank you, Rashida. And I would like to say good night to all listeners of DBS Radio, and on behalf of PISLM, I would like to wish everyone a very happy independence, and congratulate Dominica on its independence, 45 years of independence, which is just an excellent feat, I must say. Okay, so from my perspective, and from I would say the most significant aspect that happened through PISLM was our opportunity to be able to reforest most of the denuded areas in the in certain key areas. I think that was timely, given as we could see the amount of rainfall that we had in the past few days. I think if we did not do some of these interventions in a timely manner, that we could have much more significant damage than what that occurred. So I feel that was very significant that we achieved in the project, that we could have been able to plant over 46,000 seedlings and plus wildlings, get the government capacity raised to be able to produce much more than 10,000 seedlings annually. So this was the most significant area, I think, from my point of view.
Mr. Singh, the project goals that the PISLM set for the projects in Dominica, what do you think was this year's most significant activity and why?
Hi, good evening, Rashida. Thanks so much for having me here this evening, and good evening to everyone in Dominica. I think from a more global perspective, I think when we combine both projects that we have here in Dominica, I think for this year, we have really impacted the achievement of Dominica's LDNTSP, and just to spell that out, the Land Degradation Neutrality Target Setting Program goals, because this year alone we have managed to begin the process of rehabilitating over 500 hectares of land, and this includes both reforestation activity and SLM interventions on farmlands. So I think from a wider perspective, that was a really good feat that we've accomplished for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, and I'm glad that both Mr. James and Mr. Singh spoke about the denuded forests after Hurricane Maria, but I'm just guessing some of our listeners may not be entirely clear as to what kind of a direct effect that had on their lives. Like, why is it important to the average Dominican that we are reforesting where forests were denuded after the hurricane? Could you speak to that, please, Mr. James?
Yes. Well, it is very significant. Although from maybe on an average day-to-day basis, that the average Dominican might not see the direct benefit, but on an overall, especially during this prolonged rainfall, where you have these we are prone to landslides and land slippage. These denuded areas will offer a higher risk. So as we know from the average, all of us as Dominicans, that the trees hold up the soil, like we'd see it, and there are certain trees that hold up the soil a little better than others. So after Hurricane Maria, what happened was that a lot of the trees that got damaged, some of them were not able to regenerate themselves, and sometimes some of invasive species came in these areas which maybe were not best for holding up this type of soil. So what we had to do, we had to revisit these areas, look at the areas that was most damaged after Hurricane Maria, and then replant the native species in these areas. And not just the native species, we also had to look at ensuring that our wildlife had sufficient fruit trees around to be able to feed on. Because if you do not do that, what will happen is that they will then go on the farmland to then feed on the other crops. So this ensuring that we replanted these areas that were affected and were lacking vegetation, for want of a better term, I think would benefit the farmer, the average person that is traveling the roads, because you would not want landslide blocking the roads. Just the people utilizing the rivers, because we need our forests to be able to have proper water flow and a proper watershed. So it's going to affect, we do not look at it, but it affects our day-to-day life every day. We want clean water, we want to bathe in the rivers, and we want to be able to operate at a normal basis.
Mr. Coppell, it occurs to me that there's an overlap between the need for the replanting of trees and agricultural needs. As Mr. James said, if there are no fruit trees in the wild, then the wild animals will come and eat crops. Are there some other overlaps and other ways that the reforestation effort is critical to agriculture in Dominica? Would you like?
Yeah, actually, well, you can't really separate the two because agriculture involves the planting of agroforestry species as well as fruit trees. And as you know it, most of our agriculture takes place on the slopes. And one of the things that we encourage farmers is the use of trees as windbreaks and to have fruit trees at various placement on their farm. And not only it provides for stability of the soil, but it creates a certain microclimate that support other agricultural activities. So we really like the idea of in your farming system, and I using that word with a certain level of caution, that farmers adopt a more holistic approach to their farm where they can involve not just planting off. If, for instance, most farmers might be involved in an annual crop or a cash crop, where we advise them also to integrate some form of planting of trees within their farm and placing them where they do not interfere too much with their actual commercial commodity or commercial crops, or in the case of livestock where they may be grazing their livestock. But at the same time, they can use those trees in a certain way that it kind of provides some benefits. It fits within the landscape, especially if they are actually planting on steep slopes. So certainly we promote that. Another important fact is we have to, in agriculture, an important ingredient is water. And we have to, again, you cannot just ignore the fact that you would need those resources as part of your investment. And the trees itself contribute towards protecting some of the water catchments. And a lot of farmers do operate in areas that we think is bordering or in close contact with the various catchments. So we really want to ensure that farmers use agroforestry as a part of their investments in terms of agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Coppell. What a great point. I learned a lot over my time with this project about the agroforestry species and the importance of integrating tree planting, and also even the polycropping, not just having one type of crop, but having a mix of crops that work well together for different purposes. It's been a really great experience working on the projects with you gentlemen. Mr. Singh, can you talk a little bit about how the reforestation strategy for Dominica was derived? How did, what factors were taken into account when the reforestation strategy was created for Dominica?
So the reforestation strategy is more or less a two-pronged approach because it was tackled from both projects. Within the SLM project, we looked at mostly reforestation within the watersheds, and this focused on enhancing water quality and reducing soil erosion, sediment load, and turbidity within the waterways. In the Post-Maria project, it tackled reforestation based on the risks and the hazard of the steepness of certain slopes and the likelihood of land slippage happening. And the mapping of these areas were done many years ago, just after maybe a year or two after Hurricane Maria, probably in 2019, 2020. And since then, we would have had a lot of regrowth before we started actual reforestation work. But a lot of this regrowth was secondary species, a lot of young shrubs and so on. And so we had to ensure that not just because we're seeing greenery, it means that there's a healthy tree population there that is really holding up the soil. And so the Division of Forestry, and all kudos to them, they have really been behind the push behind the reforestation work. When we started the implementation plan, This was at the end of 2022. We weren't really sure how exactly it would have been done, because I think when the projects were designed, I don't think we had really a full sense of the scale of the work that needed to be done, given the fact that Dominica's landscape is extremely diverse, mountainous. You're probably one of the most mountainous islands in the region. And so I think with assistance from the Division of Forestry and under leadership by Mr. Ewan James, we got the reforestation plan together. And of course, one of our consultants, a Dominican, Miss Lynn Barron, she would have helped with the reforestation proposal, which outlined month by month what were the activities that had to be completed. And the Division of Forestry identified these denuded areas. And so we systematically started to clear these areas. And then, of course, we had a few times we had heavy rainfall. You can't really go to work for longer periods. But we systematically cleared and what we call land preparation in these areas. And at the same time, I think it was at the beginning of April, we started to procure seedlings from various private nurseries as well as the government nurseries to put into these areas, these denuded areas. And through collaboration with the forestry officers, some of those employed with the NEP as well, we started to devise a plan. And it was, the ball was in the court of Division of Forestry, and I think they played it very well by ensuring that the workforce was distributed accordingly, and we tried to achieve the objectives as close as possible. And all of that happened in just the first half of this year. So it was indeed a lot of work. The reforestation is still ongoing. It's always a work in progress. Every time you get a storm, you're going to lose some of the vegetation. But now, as Mr. James mentioned earlier, the capacity has been built to a certain level so that we can better cope for these instances where we lose a lot of vegetation cover.
That's great. I would like to bring forward the point that the consultants on the project are all Dominicans. We got the best and brightest. That's not a usual thing. Usually when you have projects, you bring consultants, you get experts from outside of the country, you just find the expert that is the best at what they do from wherever, but we got the best at what they do from inside of Dominica. We have soil scientists, working on our watershed plans. Our land use planning expert is a Dominican. Our GIS map consultant is a Dominican. Of course, our legal consultants are Dominicans. So I'm really proud to be able to say that about the PISLM. It's one of the things that separates us and differentiates this organization and its projects from a lot of other organizations. I just wanted to put in a plug for us there. So the reforestation, we did some tree planting activities with children back in March. We went to Portsmouth to the public library for International Day of Forests. We taught children from 4 secondary schools about agroforestry species. I learned a lot that day as well. Different trees and the importance of planting trees. And it wasn't their first time. It's something that the forestry division does. The Division of Forestry does on a consistent basis. They're always outreaching with children. Mr. James, would you like to speak some more about the importance of working with children as much as possible for the sustainability of these projects?
Yes. Well, like you said, one of the most important things I think we have lacked or we have failed to do in recent times is to pass on the relevant knowledge. Like our grandparents normally did, would have taught us certain techniques, certain ways of doing things. And it was important because these ways of doing things were always in a manner for sustainable practices, utilizing sustainable practices. And I think we have lost that over the years, where we see things as it is there to be used, and we use it, and we forget about the future. So we at PISLM felt that it was best to get back to the roots and start with the children, ensure that the education on sustainable starts young as possible, teach them how to plant properly, because sometimes these are just basic things that all of us knew before, and you'd be surprised right now, most of the young children, they would not have known that because of how society is right now. So we decided to go through that, and you'd be surprised how much they love these things, and they are interested in learning about the nature, what goes on nature, how does a plant grow, how does water erosion affect the land, and all of these different things, because they see it when you drive in, you see the landslide, but why does it happen? Not just the rain, but there is something that causes the rain to affect the land that much, and these things. So we felt that it was best to start from that age, implant this type of important knowledge in the minds of the children, and so they can grow up with that concept, and sometimes even in some instances go home and share it with their parents, and then they can want to have their little gardens, sustainable agriculture, backyard gardens, and they'll want to ensure that one day when they see a plant, that they will not destroy it, but rather embrace it and know that it is there for a reason.
Indeed, I find they can have Roblox, they can have PUBG, but kids still like to get their hands dirty, and they like to be in nature. They like to climb trees. I see them making tires. So I still see them climbing trees for fruit and going for fruit in season. That'll never go away. But the truth is, as you said, society has changed. The world has changed. Technology has become, the technology has become very modern and different. We are using some technology, a lot of technology actually, in what we're doing as well. So there are some, children who may not be that interested in getting their hands dirty, but there is a technological aspect that perhaps they could look to as maybe part of a future aspiration in these areas. I think specifically of a training I observed late last year, where the forest officers were taught to use a system called Kobo when they're doing their reforestation work. Mr. James or Mr. Singh, not sure if one of you would be able to comment on what that is and how it has changed the way they are doing their work.
Repeat that to me. You have to remember, Rashida, I'm not in Dominica, so I wouldn't I wouldn't be au fait with some of the day-to-day trainings that we have.
I understand. To my memory, Kobo it's an app that was developed by one of our watershed consultants, Dr. Dave Lloyd, and it helped them. It was like a GPS system, helped them kind of do geolocation of tree species while they were out in the forest, helped them convey information about what was going on in what they call the understory. I learned a lot of terminology observing these trainings. They were able to, convey information about the state, the state of what they were seeing in front of them, how many trees were down, what was going on in the understory, new growth trees, things like that in locations. So it was like, I guess, to replace the pen and paper system of conveying information about what was going on in the forest, and to compile that information electronically as well. And that was made completely in Dominica by a Dominican using computer science. I thought that was pretty impressive. I'd like to now actually shift over to, and it's really not a shift over, as Mr. Kopel said, we can't really separate the two, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about agriculture. If Mr. Singh could give us an overview of the PISLM's goals for mainstreaming sustainable land management best practices in Dominican agriculture.
Yeah, so beginning from the overarching goals, all of the things that we're trying to achieve in these projects that relates to land and land degradation and reversing land degradation falls under one of the Sustainable Development Goals 15, which looks at life on land, and 15.3 speaks to something called land degradation neutrality, where, in simple terms, allows you to, in as much as you utilize land for development, you engage in practices that restore land at the same time. In Dominica, you're faced with the fact that Mr. Coppell mentioned earlier, of having to do agriculture on steep slopes or sloping land. I don't think I've ever seen a flat piece of land in Dominica since I've been here. But in mainstreaming SLM, and you have to really understand what mainstreaming SLM actually means, because a lot of these SLM practices or sustainable land management practices are not exactly new practices. They're things that have been around for decades, maybe even centuries, but they haven't never been packaged in such a way so that the farmer can understand the true scientific benefits of these various land management approaches. And given the fact that in Dominica, I mean, like it says on the coat of arms and in the anthem about soil being, I think it's after God soil, something like that. After God land. Yes. And given that fact, it is only fitting that we try to do whatever we can and mainstream any sort of approaches, and more so environmentally based approaches that we can implement to sustain our land resources. Every time it rains, you get a heavy downpour, a lot of our soil is washed away through the rivers. I've personally witnessed when I came in October last year, the Roseau River was nice and clear in the morning, and by the time 2 p.m. we had a heavy rainfall, and it was like looking at a Milo tin. A lot of Milo tin got thrown away in the river, and that was the color of the water. So we very much need to ensure that SLM practices, and these practices are not just for big farmers, and that's something that came up in our meeting today. These SLM practices can be done locally on your own kitchen gardens, so that you don't lose the soil, the little precious soil that's in your backyard that you depend on for your kitchen garden. So, we have to ensure that we don't get too technical with the SLM approaches, ensure that the population realizes that these approaches are not necessarily rocket science or anything new, but it's something that should be done on a wider scale so that the entire landscape benefits from it.
Mr. Coppell, can you give us a few examples of some of these sustainable land management SLM practices that maybe our grandparents and great-grandparents used to do, but maybe they fell out of fashion and they would really benefit the country if we brought them back?
All right. No problem. I can do that. And I want to really re-emphasize what Likram just mentioned. It's not new. And I think what we would like to do is to really first allow people to understand why. A lot of people don't understand why they need to do what they're doing. And soil is a very valuable resource, and we need to protect it. It's a non-renewable resource. It will take a few years to form soil, and when you lose it, you don't really get it back. So I think that's an first important comment that I want to make. Now, and another important observation is the issue that we are operating on sloping lands. So I'm going to focus a lot of my examples that is really on farmers operating on sloping lands, and we know what we're talking about when we say sloping lands. In some areas where we have heavy clays, we have promoted the use of things like storm drains, contour drains, step-down drains, collector drains, and all that is in an effort to reduce the floods or the water the surface water that runs off on the slopes. That's most of it may penetrate and cause a lot of land seepage. So with the installation of storm drains and so on, we try to remove as much water in a practical way. You don't want to remove the water and cause further damage by allowing it to form these rapids along the slopes. So you design those drains with the contour, and we trap the water and allow it to come down in a very organized way, in using step down drains that will sort of reduce the speed at which the water would run down or run off the slopes. We also promote a lot of the nature-based approaches, and when I say nature-based, I mean green solution, using things like vetiver grasses. We know that these grasses have been used for some time in Dominica along the slopes to help hold the soil together. Vetiver roots go up to 10 feet in depth. They are not evasive. They will not move from where you place them, so you don't have to worry about their seeds or so on spreading all over your farm. They actually will stay where you place them on your farm. So we also plant those vetiver along the contour, and again, the spacing will depend on the level of slopes, or the degree of slopes, as well as the farming practice or the farming that you intend to do. So we use a lot of vetiver. In some of the other areas where we have stones in abundance, like for instance in the south part of Dominica, Galion, I know that you know it very well. We promote the use of stone terrace, and we have an abundance of stone in that location. And stone terrace is something that we used a long time ago, but a lot of the stones rolled off the cliff, and we never really thought of replacing them or using them. So we did use the stone terrace as a means to reduce soil or land slippage. We in some cases we introduce other aspects like the ground cover, the planting of trees, the integrated system for farming, and it's something that we looking to incorporate is the issue of geotextiles, again in an effort to prevent the slopes from eroding when you have intense rainfall. We also promoting you may not believe it, but we do have a lot of erosion from wind in some locations. So the issue of windbreak continues to be an important aspect to reduce the loss of soil, especially in the dry season. Can you imagine losing soil in the dry season, and not only in the intense rainy season? So these are some interventions that the project spent time doing, and we did it over some of the various agricultural zones. And we looked at the zones where we think the vulnerabilities are highest, and work with these farmers to ensure that they can see less impact from extreme rain or flood conditions that they may be experiencing during the heavy rainy season.
As you spoke, I was just thinking a little bit about some of the reasons perhaps why those practices fell out of practice, as per to say. Like why would you say that farmers stopped or didn't continue to maintain those practices as they did in the past? What's different about Dominica today that makes that more difficult?
That's a difficult question. I mean, we may speculate. There may be various reasons, but I think we have to understand that when we go back in the history of our agriculture, we did a lot of estate farming, and the estate had a full system. They had to trap the water, they had to control the slopes, they had to plant the trees, they had to integrate not only the tech parks in terms of producing the commodity, but integrate systems that would protect the resources that they use. Over the years, we have a lot of land fragmentation, so people split up. Well, the lands were split up in smaller portions. And when a farmer has a small portion of land, he has to make do with that to support himself. So he's going to use it in the best way he think he can to get the maximum returns. And you find this sort of transition would have contributed towards loss of some of these practices. Our generation, and like you one would have indicated when you're talking about the young people, I think we have not really made the effort in a serious way to ensure that these practices continue. And I mean, in terms of how we teach people to grow commodities, we sort of focus on the commodity rather than focus on the location where they're doing the growing. So I think a lot of emphasis was placed on growing a particular commodity rather than how best to grow this commodity within a particular landscape. So there was less focus on the landscape and more focus on the commodity. So I think we are part of the problem, and I think, like you indicated, that in 2015 when we experienced Erica, and then in 2017 Maria, we realized how more and more how it is important to really pay a serious attention to our resources, our natural resources, because we have seen the effects of our exposed land. So this might be some of the reasons that might contribute to it. I mean, there may be others. I don't know all the facts, so I will leave my colleagues here on the table that may have identified other reasons that might contribute to that.
Mr. James, what would you say?
Like Mr. Gopal said, it's very difficult to narrow down exactly why, but if I can just be allowed to share my opinion a bit, I would say it's the farmers trying to balance between really conserving the land but also ensuring that their land have economic value. I think the farmers are trying to ensure that they can survive, they can feed their children, and sometimes the type of farming that brings the highest economic value are those that damage the land the most. And so this is where we now need to come in and not just say that, okay, use sustainable measures, but also do it in such a way that brings the same economic value back to the farmer. Okay, so where we can now introduce sustainable agriculture practice, but then ensure that there is an economic value, and the project is actually looking at that, because we spend we have done, because even Mr. Coppel spearheaded that activity where we did the market analysis to look into exactly where the economic yield can come from this type of approaches. And there was consultation with many stakeholders, including farmers, on that basis. So I would think, if I have to look at it, I would think it's the balance between trying to ensure that there is the agriculture remain viable and profitable, and at the same time trying to ensure that you can survive, you can feed your children. I don't think any farmer really wants to destroy the land. Anybody purposely wants to do it, but sometimes survival kind of thrust us towards using certain techniques that might not be the best at the time.
Yes, I understand. So you spoke about the market analysis. We can touch on that a little bit. Mr. Coppel and I were speaking about that yesterday, and I found it interesting what he was explaining about the selection of commodities for that market analysis, and how the selection of commodities from the perspective of sustainable land management would be different than the commodities that would be selected solely from an economic standpoint. Would you care to just comment on that, Mr. Coppel?
Yes, no problem. Well, you covered quite a bit in terms of how you said it. Basically, if we, and you want to touch on it, if we just look at the crops that farmers tend to favor, they are the crops that bring the highest returns, whether on a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly basis. However, it may not be the crop most suited for his environment, or it may not be the type of preparation, in fact, can affect his soil and his farmland, or expose it more to certain extreme conditions. What the analysis did, however, was to bring in the equation the aspect of whether or not the practices for this commodity is somewhat sustainable, and it doesn't impact in any serious way on the land. Yes, we had to use the other indicators, the other criteria to do the selection, because you cannot just look at the issue of land in a vacuum. You would have to look at the other elements that you'd want to measure to determine the priority commodities. So one may not see the 10 top leading commodities in Dominica on been selected from the assessment we did, but they would see a range of commodities that certainly do have an element that there's some level of sustainability in establishing them or using them on some of the landscapes that that they're exposed to. So yes, we want to incorporate in the sort of in the selection process the issue of sustainable land management and the impact of whatever preparation or technology involved in production is one suited for the environment that is going to be established.
So very well. So we talked about, I'd like to kind of focus back on the work that was done on the farmlands in Dominica. And we talked about some of the practices that were done as interventions on farms in Dominica. How were farmers selected to participate in the project? And what was the process like for the farmers that were selected, Mr. Coppell?
All right. I would answer that question in two ways. There were a list of beneficiaries for the project in general. Notwithstanding, we did not limit ourselves to assessing these farmers. What we did was to set up a criteria that was covering a range of things: their vulnerabilities, the farming systems that they're involved in, their location, whether they were serious farmers, their willingness, and whether these farms could be seen by other farmers, because we want as much as possible those interventions to be seen. So the issue of visibility was an important aspect. And we set up a score rating. And then we went on to do the assessment of the farms, first and foremost from the list that we had, as well as to include other farmers within the geographical scope of the project. So we end up with moving from a list of 20-something to a list of 60-something. And from the assessment, then we went and do a ranking based on the scope of the project, a ranking in terms of the cost for the whatever installation that we had to do. And I think an important aspect is the farmer's willingness to be part of the installation, the farmer's willingness to make some level of investment. And I must admit, in most of the installation, the farmer and his team were the ones actually doing the installation. So the selection was based on the extreme in terms of the vulnerabilities, the level of the type of farming or the intensity of the farming that they were involved in, and obviously that they're willing to allow other people to see and to be part of what happened on their farms.
And Mr. Coppell, what about their extension officers in the areas where the farmers, how were they involved? I know there was some training that went on. Can you speak about that as well, please?
All right. I'm sure that you heard it from both the other gentlemen that the Ministry of Agriculture Division of Agriculture was very involved in the project throughout at all stages. They were involved in the stage of helping to develop the criteria for selection. They were involved in the selection. They were involved in the assessment. They were involved in the installation and monitoring. And very importantly, they were involved in the training, because they were trained, the technicians in the ministry were trained as trainers, and they in turn train farmers. So I think they played an important role, because the project is moving into the program phase, because the ministry do have a disaster risk reduction, a disaster risk management project activity, and part of what they're doing is well aligned with the project's output. So it's really phasing into the program aspect in the ministry. So they have been very much involved. And another element that the ministry helped quite a bit with is really doing the aerial photography of the various landscapes. So they did the topo work and assisted in that. In terms of the coordinates, the GPS coordinates of the farms, they assisted in that. And we had in terms of doing the aerial using the drone, the ministry pilots were the ones that did the footage and looking at the various landscapes that we were working with.
Very active indeed. We kudos to the Ministry of Agriculture for all the work that they did in supporting the project, and that and likewise, kudos to PISLM for the support. That it was just a very nice collaboration, as far as I've experienced during my time on the projects. Mr. James, so this question, actually, I think I'd like to ask this question across the board, but I'd like to start with Mr. James. What visible positive impact has the PISLM project work already had on its target areas? What do you think? What can people say? What can you say that they can go and see that we've done?
Okay, we have done quite a number of activities and have delivered on a lot of output so far throughout the life of this project. I can say that we have done maps, some GIS maps of 5 parishes, and we did a handing over ceremony to the Ministry of Environment. These maps will be placed at different libraries, schools, and other public venues. These for the viewing of the public, for educational and just to understand the landscape and how it is being used. Visibly, there's areas that we can see that have been replanted. If you travel in certain areas, you could see some activities in terms of sustainable measures on certain farms. These a lot of activities has been done. Many of our work so far throughout the project, foundational work. We have it like for 3 watersheds. We have developed a management plan for the watersheds and also an action plan to restore these watershed. So what these projects are doing is we are not just here to do one project and go, but basically each project will be building on each other. So far I think we are handling this in the best way, where we are doing a lot of the foundational work, where we do a lot of the testing, we do a lot of the investigation work, we make recommendation, we start from the baselines, and then we increase. So just like some of the work that we have done on the farms, very soon it will increase and to other approaches as well. So a lot of the outputs so far are document in nature, but we can visibly see activities on farms, within the forest, within the watershed. We have done some reforestation in the Cooley Beach Tree, Salisbury and Lapland watershed. These things can be seen if somebody go high up in the watershed. They would see the plants and they are tagged with the tags and the different bags around it to protect it, the netting around it to protect it. So you can see these things along the project. There are many other areas. If I touch on everything, I guess the others will not have anything to say. So I will leave some of the farming aspect and some of the documentations, especially the legal and the policy agendas for LICRAM to speak on.
Mr. Coppell?
All right. Well, what I enjoyed was the testimonies from the farmers themselves and how they saw the intervention impacted, in some cases immediately, and others they actually see in the visible impact, in a positive impact of those interventions. I could speak to a farmer in the Newfoundland area planting bananas, realizing his bunches were small because he had these waterlogged conditions on his farm. With the interventions, you had the free draining. You had a lot of draining of the farm in terms of removal of some of the excess water. So he started to see some new regrowths and an improvement in his yields, his bunches, and so on. That was one area. We spoke to some of the women. The terracing made it much easier to walk on the slopes. They recognized in the heavy rains that the water was not staying or not running off heavily on the slopes. We saw in some of the areas where you planted the vetiver grass, people recognize how the grass itself was supporting or preventing, holding the soil well and preventing land slippage in some areas. I recall one farmer in the Piditsufre area indicated that during the heavy rains, the area that was planted with vetiver did not got swept away, and the other areas that he was considering planting slide away because of the heavy rain. So we have some testimonies already under the project. People saw the interventions. We have another aspect of the project that I didn't speak about is the issue of the certification. And the farm certification, a number of farmers are now in a better position now to meet the DOM gap requirements, so they can now be certified and enter in particular markets. So there is another important impact of the project on some farmers, allowing them to now access markets that they would not be able to access because they were not certified. So we have much more farmers ready for certification and those already in the line for certification. So that's another important impact of the project. And we have well documented technological packages that now farmers have access to through the ministry. And this is the kind of thing, it's a project that really was involving the farmers in its implementation. They were involved in the actual installation. So it's not just talking about it, but we actually put it into practice on various landscapes in Dominica.
Yeah, that's a lot of work that has been done. A lot of people's lives have been positively impacted. I'm proud to say that. Mr. Singh, could you speak specifically about the work that has been done on the environmental bill that we are helping to prepare to go before cabinet?
Right, sure. So when the project started, the bill was in draft, and so what was needed really was just for the bill to be reviewed and strengthened, so that they can take into consideration all of the moving parts, different aspects of natural resource management, forest, agriculture, water, and people. You know, how people utilize the resources, and how the different agencies, departments, and so on can assist with the management, utilization of the resources, and all that sort of thing. So as with other pieces of legislation, these things are not an easy task, and you cannot get it over with very quickly. So we're in the process still of strengthening, reviewing the draft bill to ensure that at the end of the day we have a very holistic piece of legislation that caters for everyone, caters for all the uses of our natural resources, and also the conservation and preservation of natural resources. We're hoping that, I'm not a legal expert, so I can't speak to how these things go in cabinet or in the court system. So we're hoping that this type of work, we can have it concluded by let's say by maybe between the first quarter of next year, so that it can go towards cabinet, and we can have we can achieve this milestone, because it's going to be one of the first projects that would have this sort of component being executed.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for your insights there. While I have you, Mr. Singh, my last question as we come to a close here is, what can the people of Dominica expect to see from the PISLM over the next year?
All right. So, well, as you know, as you've been present in our meeting today, we have quite a lot of work coming on stream. Within the SLM project, we're going to be trying to wrap up certain activities. For example, we're going to be engaging some farmers with the installation of rotary composting bins, which seeks to help farmers to realize the benefits of organic fertilizers versus inorganic fertilizers. So, look out, maybe we'll be coming to your area, you never know. We'll be ramping up our reforestation work. A lot of persons think that reforestation might sound like a boring activity, but a couple of years down the line, when these trees grow up and you see less erosion and less land slippage, you'll be thankful for that. So if you see the forest rangers and so on coming through your communities to do awareness sessions, we encourage them to be a part, because the more help we can get to complete the reforestation exercise and be part of the group that is taking care of the trees to ensure that they reach maturity, you're going to feel the benefits of it, and you're going to feel a sense of accomplishment as well. So we will have quite a number more within next year, especially. The post-Maria project will be ramping up implementation in the agriculture component, where we'll be looking a lot more about climate smart agriculture, various approaches, and these things. And it coming back to the fact we talked about earlier, that these things are not really new that we're going to implement. It's just to resuscitate them and ensure that persons understand their utilization, their scientific significance, and how it really affects them, their livelihoods, and their farms in the long term. And well, as you said, this as we're wrapping up, I think I would just like to make a comment on the level of partnerships that we've had throughout the years with the PISLM, with AICA. AICA was responsible for quite a big chunk of the work, so Mr. Kopel and his team, thanks very much for ensuring that all the work was done. And of course, this project would not have been possible without the technical expertise from UNEP. They are the implementing agency for both of these projects, as well as the donor agency, the Global Environment Facility. And not forgetting the Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Division of Planning, these institutions that would have really assisted, because they are members of the Project Steering Committee, as with the WASCO, as well as the National Youth Council of Dominica. These institutions would have helped to guide the implementation of the projects, and will continue doing so that we ensure that the project outputs are of the highest standard and they deliver maximum benefit to the citizens of Dominica. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Your final comments, Mr. James?
Okay, just want to say thank you again to, first of all, to the listening public for taking the opportunity to at least listen to us for some time. Thank you to Mr. Cooper and Mr. Singh for joining me and yourself for hosting this very important, informative hour. I would like to, again, as the project manager, thank all the stakeholders, everyone that has played a part in making this project be at this point that it is. It has been very successful so far. Yes, we have some hurdles, but project has been successful. So I'd like to thank all the our partners and stakeholders. I would like to thank the government of Dominica for initiating these projects, because it was some of the initiations of the government by signing on to the different agreements, international agreements that have placed us in a position where we can get the necessary funding and the assistance from the international agencies to be able to implement and execute these projects. So I would just like to thank the government and the leader on that for leading the first in that area. I would also like to just say just good night to the listeners and have a very good, pleasant rest, and hope that you can continue to enjoy your independence season. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James, and to you, Mr. Kopel.
All right, the first shall be the last. All right, well, I'll join my colleagues in thanking, but I think it's important that we identify some people that really supported us in the implementation of the component that we dealt with. First and foremost, the Division of Agriculture, the extension team, Dr. Kazimi, the director. We also had with us the Bureau of Standards that played an important role in assisting us in the farm certification element and working with some of the farmers. I did have a very good local staff. We had interns supporting the project, like Mr. Marcel. We had Mr. Blandford came and working first. Mr. Macaulay was working first at one point. And we also had the NDFD that supported the business arm, to the consultants like Mr. Nation and Dr. Lloyd and Lucilla Luis. We brought in one consultant from St. Lucia to assist us with the quality manual, but we certainly had a good selection of people that supported the project, the farmers and the workers, because they were involved in the installation. So we want to really thank the farmers. And whilst you have the floor, I would like to really wish each and every one a happy Independence anniversary. And I would like to thank publicly the PISLM for engaging ICA to be part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me tonight in helping to convey what the PISLM has been doing for the people of Dominica, with the people of Dominica, in partnership with the nation. And I too would like to wish Dominica a very happy independence, number 45. We should be very proud of the progress that we've made as a nation. Thank you again for your time and attention. You can find us at the Division of Forestry if you'd like to come and speak to us. Our office is there in Bath Estate, and you can find us on Facebook. Our page is PISLM, Commonwealth of Dominica. Drop us a line and we will respond. Thank you again and have a blessed night.
Across the Caribbean, you listen. Across the world, you listen. And at home in the nature isle, you listen. You listen to DBS for